Lemon 64 presents a Playguide and video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi there, welcome to another Lemon 64 Playguide and review. In this Playguide, we'll be checking out Gremlin Graphics' Thing on a Spring, developed by Micro Projects and published by Gremlin Graphics in 1985. As the game loads, we will find a block loader, and unfortunately this counts down 200 blocks, and at the end of those 200 blocks you would expect the game to load, but no, it continues for at least maybe 50 blocks more, meaning this game takes quite some time to load. Title screen, we are introduced to this fantastic Rob Hubbard music, and we can also gain a scrolly text at the bottom where we can find out what we are supposed to be doing. And you can see the keys are handily on display on the right hand side, and if we press the R key we can even redefine those keys, which is a throwback to the ZX Spectrum period and is always welcome if you happen to play with the keyboard. Always wanted to get deep into this game, so let's press fire and check this game out. Thing on a Spring can be most likened to a version of Impossible Mission, only converted by Gremlin Graphics. Instead of a guy somersaulting around the screen, we now get a thing on a spring. And just like Impossible Mission, we have to move through corridors into rooms, and in those rooms we will find items which we need to collect. On the later levels we will find items of a map or maybe a key card, and collecting all those items will reveal the end of the game. In the meantime, just like Muncie on the Run, we'll have to collect an item, and that's our rescue kit, and there are a number of items scattered around the landscape which we'll need to pick up in order to get around that landscape. These packages are handily scattered around the first few screens, and you can see a present, and that's precisely what we need to pick up. On this first screen of the game, all we have to do is to collect those gifts on our rescue kit, and then we can move to the elevator at the end of this level and move on to the other 3 levels in this game. That's our first power-up collected, and that will allow us to negotiate those moving staircases which frequent this level. And without that you will not be able to ascend moving staircases, but if you don't collect that in the correct way, unfortunately you cannot get out of this level. And so what I'm going to have to do instead is to commit suicide, because I can't seem to find a quick key to take me back to the main menu. Die, we are given a game over screen made out of game over symbols, and that is quite fun to see that piling up on the screen, but not very fun when you are trying to get somewhere with this game. To add insult to that injury, we have also made it onto the high score table in last place, and unlike Monty on the Run, unfortunately those are all printed on the screen at once, so you can see that humiliation right from the go. And now let's press fire again, let's try this game again, and let's try to get that first package on the mission, and let's try to get a bit further. the high platform, I can either jump on the platform on the right and jump across, or I can actually land on the lower platform and I can actually use that. But you can see I have completely mistimed my landing, and that means that I can't land directly on the corner where I wanted to land, and that means I've virtually written off my chances of this game. And yes, returning back, if you collide with any of the enemies, that will degrade our power. You can see the energy bar right at the bottom of the screen takes a hit every time we collide with one of those items. So you can pick up extra energy as the level goes on, but unfortunately if you make a mistake just like this, then you cannot progress and you cannot jump to the point that you needed to jump, even if you figure out how to do it. Like Impossible Mission, the somersaulting in this game is quite tedious, and rebounding off everything, which this character tends to do, gets a little bit boring pretty quickly, and it actually gets pretty infuriating as well when you're just trying to make one jump and you can't make it because of the controls and bouncing off everything. Top left corner, we can see our score is piling up by 1 point every time we survive 1 second in this game, and you will also get some hundreds of points if you collect some of those items that we need. And so far we haven't collected anything, and we have virtually no energy remaining. At this point our character will flash and colour cycle, which is pretty funky, but then again we know we are about to die. Try again. Now that we know how to collect that item, at least let's try again with this level and see if we can't jump over everything. You can see those trains remind us of the Andrew Morris Otherworld game, which was actually a homage to Thing on a Spring, and the Otherworld game is somewhat easier than this, at least somewhat easier to understand, but this game is more rewarding if at least you can get that first item and get underway with the mission. On a Spring was produced in 1985 for the Amstrad CPC and the Commodore 64 by Gremlin Graphics. The game was written by Jason Perkins and Anthony Clark, and the graphics were by Mark Rogers. The other notable interesting fact is that Rob Hubbard created the music, and this was his first ever composition for a Commodore 64 game. And as you will agree, it's amazing. Julian Rignall commented that the sound is unbelievable. Zap 64 also has a connection with this game because it used the characters Thing on a Spring and Rockford as a graphic element in its own margins of the magazine, and so Thing on a Spring, a character, outlasted the game. Thing on a Spring also spawned Thing Bounces Back, which was released as a sequel in 1987, also by Gremlin Graphics. Jason Perkins also created and converted a number of games onto the Commodore 64, including Pixie Pete in 1984, which is a Dig Dug clone, Maggot Mania in 1983, which is a Centipede clone, Orange Squash in 1983, and also he converted Jack the Nepper for Gremlin Graphics in 1986. After his time on the Commodore 64, Jason Perkins converted Deflector to the Amiga in 1988, and also he worked on The Time Machine in 1990 for Activision. He worked on Apocalypse in 1994 for Virgin, before perhaps his most popular creation on the Amiga, Rough and Tumble, appeared in 1994 for Wunderkind. on the Commodore 64, it doesn't look like we are having much luck trying to get through this level, and the very simplest first task seems to be defeating us at this point. And yes, some of these things have to be pixel perfect, but some of these jumps can actually be mastered if you stand in the right place. Just on the very edge of the platform is usually better, and walking directly off that platform, as you can see, made sure that we landed on the spot. Unfortunately, we did not land directly on the spot, and we jumped, and that means that we've written off the whole level yet again. Unfortunately, our hero cannot jump very precisely, and he tends to go around in the same jumping position, which means if you make a mistake, then it's instant game over, and there's nothing you can do about it. And yes, this is me warping through the emulation in frustration, trying to play this game. To get this very first collection precise, you can't wander to the edge of the platform on the other side, otherwise you cannot get back again. No, you have to take down this corner and those first 3 blocks, and then you can leave and get on with the rest of the game. If you do that, then that's fine. If you can't, then that's virtually game over, and you'll just have to practice that until you get it right. So, for the final time in this review and play guide, let's try that level again. You can see the graphics on offer are pretty basic, but we do have a coloured filled-in background. It is not sheer black, like quite a lot of ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64 games had a black background. And in these rooms it is just enough to make it more than the average game. And the average game really would not go to this much trouble with the sprites, and the average game really would be a frustrating effort. But this game is slightly above the average because it does reward the player eventually by their sheer perseverance and their sweat, and sometimes it can be very rewarding to get the item that you wanted in the first place. There aren't many sound effects in this game, but that beep means we've just collected a tool, and that allows us to ascend ladders, and that is critical to enable us to get through this game. In between the rooms you will find a corridor, and these guys really deplete our energy, and you can see a time limit is counting down at the top, and that really is our oil meter, and that oil meter will deplete as we continue through the game. But now that we are in through the game, we can now collect our second item, which is the rocket pack, and now when you see those bottles on the floor, we can use those to ascend the level like a rocket, and we can skip most of the level out. First screen, some levels are very easy, and sometimes you have to take damage in this game rather than wait for the enemies, and that's not such a bad thing because it does give us extra energy later on. And look at that, a free package, and that gives us a lift access, and that means that the elevator at the end of this level can now be triggered. We certainly need the lift pass in order to get off this first level. Sometimes the controls are counterintuitive and you have to aim for one thing in order to bounce up towards another, but now that we've made it and we've got that lift pass, all we need to do is to find another rocket and get ourselves towards that exit. Time and trouble, we managed to find some more oil, and that's topped up the central meter you can see. And you can also see Roman numerals underneath the score, which we can see on the main level. That's actually the elevator, and that's the actual floor that the elevator is on at the moment, and that elevator will move up and down, and so we'll have to time that so the elevator is on our floor. game should be fun and exciting, it doesn't shy away from being infuriating, and bouncing off items just like this will have to be mastered. And yes, I'm trying to get through to the bottle or the rocket pack at the very top, and that will mean that we can simply skip this level out and travel straight through it. Top right, you can also see a blank box, and that is where we gather our escape items, maybe the exit pass. That is a picture that builds up a little bit like a map, and those bits of items will be on floor 2, 3 and 4 in this game, and I don't think you can find any of the map on level 1, which we are still on at the moment. And you may notice some oil there, and we seem to be in need of some oil, so let's risk everything and try to grab it. Yes, it is possible, by luck or by crook we managed to grab it, so that means that we'll have to still avoid these aliens. We're up to a few hundred points now, so we've reached a high score table, and we've also reached another dead end. Some players can jump over this hi-fi, but what you may notice is a bottle, and that means we can simply rocket out of that level now that we have the rocket. And you can see the moving platform, the moving steps, we can now ascend those because we have that item. We've seen another package that we needed to pick up, and unfortunately we collected the bottle, and that means that we rocketed out of the level. But fortunately this screen is a little less intimidating than most, and it isn't long before we find our way back, and it doesn't rob lives away needlessly on these types of screens, but you can see simply walking off certain platforms is enough. That means we've collected another item. The S shield in the bottom corner is actually the trampoline icon, so that we can use trampolines on level 2, 3 and 4. That's level 1 completed, and we have collected all 4 items that we need to progress the escape kit, as I like to call it, and there are a couple more items to pick up, some more on level 2. But what I didn't realise now that we've reached the elevator is that we have to press fire here in order to stop the elevator on our level, at which point the light will go red, and that means that the elevator must stop on our level, and if you don't, then you'll have to wait for that elevator to travel all the way down to the bottom and all the way back up to the top again. Quite sure, but I think that you have to press fire on the required level to stop on the platform that you really want to stop at, but leaving the fire button alone, that will travel all the way down to the bottom, and from here it leads on to a very difficult screen indeed. I won't be collecting any of the mystery puzzle pieces, so let's just move on to the scores. Your Commodore gave this 3 out of 5, that's 60% in September 1985. Your 64 also gave it 3 out of 5. Commodore Horizons gave the game 7 out of 10, that's 70%. Your Commodore gave Thing on Spring 4 out of 5, that's 80%. And perhaps the highest score went to Zap64, which gave this game an amazing 93% in August 1985. On a Spring remains a formidable game, and at least I hope I've shown you at least how to play it, even though playing this game is rather frustrating, and I really would not recommend this game to children and amateurs and people that really need paramedics on standby. Thank you very much.